The 2025-2026 college football season is in the books, so it's time for me to revisit my preseason predictions to see how I did. And if you guys have been watching this channel, you know that I dropped a preseason rankings video for every single conference or every single power conference in the country. So I'm going to be ranking to those, starting today with the conference that did win the national championship game, the Big Ten. And before I get into it, please make sure that you like, comment, subscribe. It means a lot to me and this channel. All right, so on screen right now, you will see my postseason ratings and rankings. This is basically a ranking on my opinion of how each team finished the season, focusing primarily on the quality of team and less about their actual resume, since the preseason rankings did not include or focus on schedules. But anyways, let's go ahead and get right into the video. All right, let's go ahead and see what I have at the bottom of my list here. In my postseason rankings, I have Purdue, and I can't imagine that they were much higher on my preseason rankings because no one really expected them to be that good. So let's go ahead and find out. I think I did have them last, but we'll see. Starting with the bottom of the barrel, the Purdue Boilermakers. And Purdue fans, all right, one for one. Let's be real. 2025 is going to test your patience. Barry Odom was the smart hire. He's mature. He's disciplined. He knows defenses, and he's a really good guy. But he walked into probably the worst roster situation in the entire Power Four. Last year they went 1-11, and that's about as painful as it gets. At least you got the one win, but that's not really much of a prize, really. On offense, who knows what we're going to get? There's a new quarterback, and whoever wins the job there is probably not going to make a difference. The wide receiver room is patchwork, full of transfers and unknowns. They do have so like I said, year one under Barry Odom was always going to be a rebuild, especially with such a depleted roster, as I mentioned. Just took in a bunch of transfers, so there wasn't really a firm foundation. And like I said, quarterback did not end up being very consistent, very inconsistent play there. Both the guys that they had, they did show they showed talent, but they just were very inconsistent and were pretty much, that pretty much describes the whole team, honestly. Offense was just overall really unreliable, and they showed some flashes along the O-line, but they just couldn't sustain momentum. The bright spot in their tight end room, they have a guy returning from injury, and he could be a security blanket, but really the only true proven piece is Devin Mockobee, and they're probably going to lean on him until his legs fall off. But if the O-line can't hold... Yeah, so I was actually right about Mockobee. He was definitely the heartbeat of this team until he had that season-ending injury, which sucked, but... yeah, old, then it's not really going to matter what Mockobee does. On defense, it's a total reset, basically an all-transfer front and back seven, and that sounds scary, but when you gave up as many points as Purdue did last year, a reset is not the worst idea, but still don't expect miracles. There's new faces, a new system, and that usually means rough early weeks and probably rough all 12 weeks for Purdue. The silver lining here is, though, that Odom can build something. He did solid work at Missouri, and I think he learned under some really solid guys, but the roster is just years away from scaring anyone in this conference. Yeah, so believe it or not, I was talking about defense there for a second, and they did improve on defense, even if the scores look pretty gross. Manny Powell, he finished as the Big Ten's leading tackler, and they had some other guys that were not too far behind. So they did improve slightly on defense. Just it doesn't look like that way whenever you look at how bad they got beaten a lot of times. But it is what it is. And really anyone, period. 2025 is about small wins, competing in games they normally would get blown out in, developing an identity, and maybe pulling up a surprise upset. Maybe best case scenario is still probably they didn't do either of those things. They didn't have any conference wins or even any power conference wins, period, and they were rarely even competitive. Obviously, it takes time to rebuild a program like Purdue, or a team at least that's as bad as Purdue. Unless, of course, you're Kurt Signetti, which, you can rebuild any program apparently, but we will get to him later. About 3 to 4 wins and just hoping for 2026 to be better. Worst case is another single win or 0 win game and more pain. Either way, Purdue fans should buckle up. It's going to take some time, but Odom is the right step. At number 15, Yeah, so no team obviously wants to go 2-10, but this year was never going to be pretty for Purdue. I said that already, but as uncomfortable as it is for them to have gone 2-10, they did improve their win total from last year, which I know is saying something. The year before, it was it was a pretty low bar to beat, but I do still think Barry Odom is the right hire. I think he's the right guy at Purdue, but they definitely earned their spot at the very bottom of the Big Ten. All right, let's move on. I have the Maryland Terrapins. And last year, I said that Maryland, I'm 2 for 2. I had Maryland at number 17 in my postseason rankings as well. So I'm glad that right now it's feeling pretty good. 17 and 18 were both accurate. Was going to be special. They were going to surprise everyone, and they did surprise me by being terrible. Yeah. This year, I'm not falling for it. I'm guarding my heart. On offense, there are just way too many questions. Only 3 starters return, and that's rough no matter how you spin it. Yeah, so I'm glad that I did learn from my mistake from the previous year. I kept my expectations pretty low, and it ended up paying off for me. The season kind of just unraveled after they choked 3 consecutive fourth-quarter leads. It all kind of went downhill from there, and they have also one Big Ten win, and that was against Wisconsin, so, quarterback is a total mystery, but whoever wins that job is going to inherit a pretty solid wide receiver room. They have Octavian Smith Jr., plus some transfers in Jaleel Farouk from Oklahoma and Caleb. Yeah, sorry I'm stopping this so much, but the roster, they just lack depth, and they were very young. And their true freshman quarterback that they had, Malik Washington, he did show some flashes. He cooled off later in the season, but he actually was pretty solid for Maryland. And I don't really blame him for them being in the spot that they were in this game. Webb from Tennessee, and Nolan Ray, he can tote the rock, so there is some depth at running back. Oh, and what's that one more time? I mentioned that they had a pretty solid wide receiver room. That's actually incorrect. That was not correct. They had a pretty rough wide receiver room, honestly. They were one of the worst in the country in drops. All the guys I mentioned, Farouk, Octavian Smith Jr., Caleb Webb, they just did not produce, and the running back room also disappointed. The real problem here, though, is the offensive line. Last year, bottom 10 nationally in sacks allowed and havoc rate. This year, still looks thin, unproven, and portal heavy, but we'll see. It really doesn't matter who plays quarterback if he's running for his life the whole time. That can really just kill drives before they even start. On defense, the O-line, it had its ups and downs. They were pretty terrible at run blocking, but they were a lot better at pass blocking, so the quarterback was not running around for his life the whole time, which was definitely helpful for that young quarterback. Ups and downs, but overall, not great. It's maybe addition by subtraction here. There's a new defensive coordinator stepping in, which is good because last year's defense was historically awful at stopping the run. They're replacing nearly the entire front.
Yeah, they were still really bad
scary,
at stopping the
but
run.
Also, those guys weren't really stopping anyone in the first place. Secondary has a couple of returners who can play, but depth is still scary thin. So what it really comes down to here is that the O-line. So like I said, they were still really bad at stopping the run. Their secondary was actually pretty solid. They were especially good at getting turnovers. Is what it is. Line needs to gel fast, and that new defensive coordinator needs to work some magic for them to have any hope here. If that happens, they could flirt with bowl eligibility, but if not, it feels more like a 3-4 season right now. Big picture, so they actually ended up going 4-8 with only one conference win. So they did not, in fact, get bowl eligible, but I was right about it being a 3-4 win season. Really, his seat isn't hot yet, at least I don't think so, but it definitely could get warm if the rebuild sputters. I'd love to be wrong again, but my gut says 2025 Maryland is going to look a lot like 2024 Maryland, only with... Yeah, and I was right about that too. Loxley, and about the Loxley stuff as well. Loxley is on the hot seat after this past season. They did not fire him. I thought that they would. It looked like they were going to in this season, but they finished with the same conference record as they did the year before and the same overall record as well. So not a lot of progress to be seen from Maryland. A few different names on jerseys. And at 14, I have Northwestern. And They may not be anywhere close to the best of the conference, but there is hope here. Offensive coordinator Zach Lugin comes over. Okay, so I did whiff a little bit here. They ended up surpassing my expectations for them in the preseason quite a bit. I had them a lot closer to the middle of the pack than this low in the postseason rankings, and I have them, kind of towards the bottom here in the preseason, like most other people did. So they were actually ended up being a lot better. Still middle of the pack, but a lot better than bottom of the pack. We're fresh off of an FCS national title run, bringing in modern spread concepts, and this offense badly needed something like this. At quarterback, they have Preston Stone, the SMU transfer. He's got a solid arm, good mobility, and actually pretty good starting experience, a clear upgrade. I don't know if many of you guys remember, but he actually had a lot of hype last season before losing his starting job to Kevin Jennings. So the talent is definitely there. Surprisingly, they have a pretty stable O-line. So Preston Stone, he was a net positive, I think, for Northwestern, despite throwing the most interceptions in the conference. He was very inconsistent, but whenever he was hot, he was pretty hot, and he's what got them to the middle of the pack and kept them from being at the bottom of the pack. So, it came with some bumpy spots, but I think overall he was a net good. Deeper than people realize with 4 guys who logged starts last year. The running back room is not super flashy, but there are still... So, I feel like I was pretty right on about the offensive line. They were super solid, which actually ended up leading to a running back room that was a lot more efficient than I had expected, especially considering how banged up those running backs were week to week. So they kind of helped each other out there. Plenty of solid options to run behind the line. They had some big additions like wide receiver Griffin Wild, who transferred. Yep. He gives them a field stretcher they lacked before. On defense... Griffin Wild did, in fact, pan out as I expected. He was their wide receiver 1 by a long shot. It's quietly the team's strength. The front 4 is sneaky good, and they can generate pressure without blitzing every single down, which is definitely nice. The linebackers are experienced, tough, and smart. Secondary is probably better than most people realize, a mix of returning starters and some portal depth. This unit can keep them in games. So, their defense was actually pretty impressive. They finished top 10 in several statistical categories. They held their opponents to fewer than 20 points per game on average, which, that's pretty solid for a unit like this at Northwestern. And could be even better in 2025 than they were last year. So what does the ceiling look like for this team? They're not suddenly going to jump into playoff talks by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think they're any longer guaranteed as a W on everyone's schedule. Could they grind out 5 and 6 wins and sneak into a bowl? Absolutely. If Stone settles in fast and the wide receiver... they did exactly that. They grinded out 6 wins before winning their 7th in their bowl game. So, room, good for them. Proves functional. That could definitely happen. I think I'm going to call this year step 1 of a proper rebuild here. If they show real fight and pull off an upset or two, I'm going to call this mission accomplished. It's not always going to be pretty, but I don't think it's going to be last year's rock fight either. And they did pull off an upset or two with Penn State and Minnesota. So pretty successful season, I would say. Definitely a step in the right direction for them. So I was a bit lower on them, but I think I was right about a lot of their strengths and weaknesses. At number 13, I have the Michigan State Spartans, and it's year 2 under Jonathan Smith. Okay. The buzz is definitely real, but for me, 2025 still feels like a bridge year between promise and real contention. And right back on track with Michigan State here. I had them ranked 1 spot lower in my postseason ranking, so I feel really good right now, honestly, about having them ranked here in the preseason. So, quarterback Aiden Childs, he is the reason for hope here. He's got a big arm, he's got quick feet, and he flashed some poise last season in his freshman year. The staff also added in wide receiver Omari Kelly. I was wrong about Aiden Childs. He looked pretty flat this season, and ultimately he ended up getting benched kind of halfway through. They also just couldn't get much going on through the ground or through the air. So, from Auburn, he should help stretch the field. They also added running back Elijah Tolliver from UTEP. He brings speed they just didn't have last year. The offensive line is still patchwork, but they're better than the revolving door they were last year. They were just overall was a pretty poor offensive showing for Michigan State. Just very, very inconsistent. it was pretty rough. This offseason, they went heavy in the portal, bringing in multiple Power 4 transfers. If they gel quickly, Childs finally gets the pass protection he might need and the running support he needs to take that next step. On defense, the pass rush is the elephant in the room here. They had one of the worst sack rates in the Big Ten, and they hit the portal for help for sure, but there's not really any instant impact players or superstars that showed up, in my opinion. Asking that secondary to cover forever just isn't realistic, and that could be their fatal flaw. Yeah. Secondary is fine, nothing elite, but not really a glaring weakness either. The linebacker room is scrappy. They do return some experience, which should help limit big plays, but if the front can't generate heat, that really doesn't matter how good your DBs are. Eventually, they're going to break. So what's the real outlook here? Yeah, I hit the nail right on the head there. I pointed out that they would struggle if they couldn't be more disruptive up front, and that is pretty much exactly what we saw. Like I predicted, asking the secondary to cover for as long as they were asked to just was not realistic, and that ended up being their fatal flaw. Their linebacker room was the best unit, which I also expected and said in there. So I was actually super on point about the defense as a whole. Here, the team could absolutely pull an upset against a team like UCLA, Indiana, or even Washington, but it still, to me, feels yeah, they didn't pull off any of those upsets, especially against Indiana. I don't even think they played Washington, although I could be wrong about that one, but I just don't think that they did. Anyways, yeah, they ended up going 4-8, 1-8 in the conference. That one win coming against Maryland, who we already talked about not being very good. Feels like a 5 to 6 win season. Unless Childs can play at an all-conference level and the pass rush is just magically better. The big picture here, though, is that Smith is building something that should be special by 2026, but 2025 is more about... Yeah, I don't think Jonathan Smith is building much anymore. He was fired after the season, and like I said, Childs, he also just didn't pan out at quarterback, so now he is taking his ball and going somewhere else. I believe he's going to Northwestern. So, yeah, did not pan out. Growing pains, Childs learning on the job, and just finding out who else can be a core part of that team long term. Still not quite ready yet, but you can definitely see the blueprint starting to come together. At number 12, I have the Wisconsin Badgers, and 2025 feels like a return to what made Wisconsin. Okay, I don't know why I said 12. We're at 14 here. Yeah, I was one spot off on Wisconsin, too. I had them at number 13 in my postseason rankings, so still doing pretty good so far, honestly. I think that this is about as good as you can expect from a preseason and postseason ranking, so I feel pretty good about that. Wisconsin, and I think that might finally get them back on track. On offense, they bring in a new offensive coordinator who seems to favor the old flavor of ground and pound, play action, and ball control, rather than the modern throw-it-everywhere experiment that was just a total flop there the prior years. Quarterback Billy Edwards transferred in from Maryland, and he's not going to light up the stat sheet, but he fits. He is not a game breaker, but with this system, he doesn't really have to be. The ground game is going to be the real heartbeat here. Unfortunately, Billy Edwards, his season was cut short due to injury, an issue that kind of plagued the whole team, honestly. But Edwards, his numbers weren't really great anyways before he got injured, so who knows what the season would have looked like if he would have been in. But the way that it did work out, there was 4 quarterbacks taking meaningful snaps, which is just never what you want. Running back duo of Dylan Jones and Darren Dupree, who look like a classic Badger Thunder and Thunder approach. Neither is going to be Jonathan Taylor, but they're tough runners who can handle big workloads. And if Wisconsin ends up winning games, it's going to be because they ran it 40-plus times and dared you to stop them. I don't know. They were definitely more focused on the run, but they also weren't exactly effective running the ball. It looked a lot like more of the same, honestly. I will say it is a bit tough to grade Wisconsin because of all the injuries they had that plagued their season. It's really tough to know how good they would have been had all those injuries not happened. But this is football, that's what happens. Plus, they did also have a very brutal schedule, which obviously didn't help. The O-line is getting big again. They got bullied last year, words that haven't been said about Wisconsin often in the past. So they reloaded, they added bulk, toughness, and a couple transfers like Charles Perkins to stiffen things up. And that interior should be solid. Tackles need to prove that they can protect just enough to set up play action. And the passing game is taking a less is more approach. The new OC won't ask Edwards to do much, like I mentioned. They did add wide receiver Jaden Ballard from OSU, and he adds needed speed here, someone to keep safeties honest. The tight end room is actually a pretty steady room with some solid options, good for short yardage situations and in the red zone. Success here looks like 180 yards passing, no picks, and a couple of big play action shots a game. Defense is Fickell's wheelhouse. They got pushed around last year, and they know it, so they added size and depth up front, especially with Perkins. The linebackers are solid, and the secondary is quietly a strength for this team. 4 starters back, a veteran group that should keep them competitive against pass-heavy attacks. The big question is, will they really commit to this style of play? If they do, they play slow, control the clock, run, trust defense. Wisconsin can drag better teams into ugly. Yeah, so talking about defense, they did actually improve on defense. It was actually their strength, and it did keep them in several games. They did their part. They weren't incredibly disruptive, but they were very good at stopping the run. So overall, they were just much better than they were last year on this side of the ball. So I was right about that at least. Close games, total rock fights. But if not, we could see a pretty stuck in the middle, still searching for an identity team that is barely bowl eligible. But I think the ceiling here is 8-4. They can upset a few big names by running it down their throats. So that's where I see Wisconsin. And number 11, they did have a few upsets against teams like Washington and Illinois. They showed promising flashes, but they still weren't very great. They finished the season going 4-8 with 2 of their wins being against the conference opponents that I just mentioned. So surprisingly, Luke Fickell, he is going to be there next year as their head coach. I really expected him to have more success at Wisconsin than he has had, but that's just not what's happened, and I don't know if it's going to happen at this point. We have the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, and they've been patient, and quietly they are turning into one of those teams nobody wants to play, even if they're not ready to. Okay, I kind of would like my team to play Rutgers or have Rutgers on their schedule because they weren't very good this year. We are still on track here. Again, I had Rutgers 2 spots lower in my postseason ranking, so again, pretty good. I'll take it. Truly break through. On offense, there's a blend of stability and some new faces. They have quarterback Ethan Kaliak-Manis. He returns, and that's a big deal. He's got some experience plus some familiarity with the system. He wasn't particularly great last year, but he was solid. He threw for over 2,000 yards, and he should keep improving. Yep. As far as the running back room goes, they don't have Kyle Monangai anymore, and it's now the Antoine Raymond show. He's not the same workhorse, but he can be more explosive, and he can change the pace of the game. If the O-line gives him the lanes, offensively as a whole, Rutgers was actually very good. Ethan Kaliak-Manis, he actually eclipsed 3,000 passing yards. The wide receiver room was super efficient, and the running back I mentioned, Antoine Raymond, he was one of the best backs in the country. He actually was a semifinalist for the Doak Walker Award, so he actually did pretty well filling Kyle Monangai's shoes. He was actually a semifinalist for the Doak Walker Award, so he actually did a fine job filling Monangai's shoes quite well. So offensively, this was an incredible output for Rutgers. He could break bigger plays than Monangai did, but again, I don't expect him to fill those shoes. At wide receiver, they lost some production, but they do have some new guys coming in from the portal and some young guys ready to step in. It's not a star-studded group, but it is competent. The interior O-line is quietly strong. They have some real Big Ten size. Biggest question mark, though, is still the tackles. If they hold up, the offense could quietly surprise. Run defense did struggle badly last year. Coaches hit the portal hard, and they added some bigger bodies up front, some thicker guys to clog the middle. Secondary is interesting. They mix some transfers with some developed players, kind of like has been the theme throughout a lot of these different position groups. They should be better, though. They might give up some bigger plays early on as they start to gel. But the linebacker room, that's the wild card. Flashes last year, but they still need to be more consistent. So what's the plan for the Rutgers? So, defense was definitely the issue for Rutgers this season. They gave up 7 to 9 yards per play, or 7.9 yards per play, sorry. that's not what you want to see ever. I feel like that was a coordinator issue and a system issue more than a player issue, honestly, because players that were good last season just all of a sudden weren't good this year, and I kind of have a hard time seeing how that could be unless it is a scheme or a coordinator issue. But yeah, it did end up really costing them because they had an opportunity to be very special with the offense that they had, even if they were a bit more predictable on offense. Just stay balanced, don't beat themselves, and win in the margins. And that means special teams, red zone stops, and turnovers. They can't out-talent teams like Ohio State, but they can force you to play uncomfortable, close games. So for me, I think the ceiling for this team is about 7-5, maybe knock off a ranked team in an ugly home game. But the floor is about 4-8 if the O-line and defense just don't come together. So I actually think I did pretty well with their final record. I said that their floor was around 4 wins and their ceiling's around 6 wins. So 5 wins is right in the middle there, the base prediction. So only 2 conference wins against Purdue and Maryland. Both teams aren't very good. We've already talked about them. Those are the 2 worst teams in the conference, but they were pretty competitive in most of their games. At number 12, I have the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And last year was gritty, but a bit uneven. Now, PJ Fleck is rowing the boat into 2020. Yeah, I only was 2 spots off on Minnesota. I had them at number 10 in my postseason rankings, so pretty good. 5 with some real questions and some sneaky reasons for optimism. Drake Lindsey, he sat behind Max Brelsmer last year, who brought a veteran stability, and now it is the Lindsey show. He has a huge frame, big arm, big potential, and if he's ready, Minnesota could actually get better quarterback play out of him, but that is a big if. They lost their top 2 receivers, which means we should expect a return to the classic Gopher football, which is pounding the rock. Running back Darius Taylor is a beast. He's one of the conference's best kept secrets. He can handle volume and break tackles, but he's going to need some help. Along the O-line, they are replacing 3 starters, which is never. Yeah, I mean, Darius Taylor is a dog, but they just didn't use him as much as they should have. They really didn't have much talent in their wide receiver room either. I was actually pretty impressed with Drake Lindsey. He had his ups and downs, but I thought he had a pretty good starting year for the Gophers. So, ideal, especially for a run-heavy team like Minnesota. And there's experience among those new starters, but the unit just has to gel really fast. Likely better in run blocking and pass protection early on. Defense should be like a punch-you-in-the-mouth style of ball. They promoted a defensive coordinator from within, and he keeps the same system, tough, disciplined, grinded out. The defensive line is quietly nasty. 4 of the top 17 defensive linemen in the Big Ten are on this team. They should have a solid pass rush and should be able to stuff the run pretty well. Linebackers are experienced, they're smart, they're steady. Secondary, there's a lot of new faces, but there is talent. Expect early growing pains that should end up settling towards the middle of the season. As for their ceiling, I think on defense, it's kind of hard to quantify or qualify how good they were at certain positions because they really just schematically went boom or bust. I think that they kind of knew that their front line was their strength. And their linebackers were much stronger than their secondary. So they just kind of decided to send the house every time and generate a lot of negative plays. And also left them open to a lot of explosive down the field plays pretty often. But it's pretty much high risk, high reward. Either they get a big sack or a tackle for loss or a fumble, or the other team would throw a 40-yard bomb down the field. Lindsey clicks, Taylor runs wild, and the defense stays top half in the league, they could get 8 to 9 wins, but the floor, I think, is about 4 and 5 if the quarterback struggles and the offensive line just can't protect. And they ended up at the end of the regular season going 7-5, and they picked up their 8th win in that bowl game that they had, and 5 of those wins did come in conference, although when they played some of the bigger boys in the conference, they kind of got blown out. So still, they actually did get a lot closer to their ceiling for me than they did their floor. So I would say it's a pretty successful season for the Gophers. Number 11, I have the UCLA Bruins, and things have suddenly got way more fun in Westwood, and it's mostly thanks to one name that and I already know what name I'm going to say. But first, I will say I was 3 spots too high for UCLA. which from where I had them in the postseason rankings. So we are getting a little off track here, but I am still very impressed so far with how accurate my preseason rankings ended up being to the postseason. Not to pat myself on the back, but doing pretty good. So I know that's probably going to change closer to the top end of this list, but for now, I am very happy with it. So let's go ahead and continue. Going to say correctly, Nico Iamaleava. Got it.
Yeah, I knew I was going to say that name.
Everything. Former 5-star quarterback from Tennessee. He's a huge arm, mobility, charisma. Just by stepping on campus, he raises that team's ceiling. And pair that, I was on the Nico hype train. I mean, he just did not pan out the way that I expected him to. I mean, he has a ton of talent, don't get me wrong, but he also was a very inconsistent turnover machine that just didn't perform as good as I thought. He honestly played like it was his first year, and it was his first year at UCLA, but he played as if he didn't have that first year at Tennessee, in my opinion. With the new offensive coordinator from Indiana's surprisingly great offense last year, and you have legit hope for fireworks. And Nico has some weapons to work with. Wide receiver Quasi Gilmer is a returning star, and he could explode with a real quarterback like Nico. They also have a tight end who missed all of 2020. See, I think that UCLA's offense kind of shows you how good Indiana was, because I'm not dogging on the offensive coordinator here, but he came from Indiana after Indiana had a great offense, and UCLA did not. Indiana maintained having a good offense. I think it's just Kurt Cignetti over there is crazy, but UCLA, by bringing that guy over, they had a very, very rough offense as a whole. The players that I expected to break out like Quasi Gilmore just really didn't. So I don't know what was going on, if it was a coach thing or a player thing, but offense was very rough. Or with injury, he's back and he's healthy. Running back Javian Thomas from Cal, he's shifty, he can catch out of the backfield. He is also a really solid threat. UCLA's run game was terrible last year, near the bottom nationally. But with Thomas and the portal linemen that they have coming in, they could go from being one of the worst to being kind of middle of the pack, which is a massive upgrade for a team like this. On defense, they are salty up front and thin behind. The front seven is tough, they're physical, they're experienced, and they should be able to stop the run pretty well.
Should be able to stop the run?
They were not able to stop the run at all. In fact, they were one of the worst in the country at it, and they were also one of the worst in points allowed. So just all around really bad on defense. The linebacker room, they did lose 3 starters, but the coaching staff trusts their development and the pipeline they have there, but depth is definitely still a concern here. Secondary is built through the transfer portal, so again, high risk, high reward. But if the front dominates, it can cover up for those secondary growing pains. The ceiling here is probably 8 to 9 wins. That would probably require Nico to shine like I expect him to. The offense maybe to jump into that top 25 range, and the defense to hold. Maybe they're a dark horse for even a New Year's Six Bowl. Crazy that I even mentioned a New Year's Six Bowl. They were not even close to conversations for that. They ended up falling way short. Way short. But the floor here, though, is 5 to 6 wins, I think, if the O-line is shaky and the defense has some injuries.
At number 10, they ended up falling even below the floor that I had set for them, losing to multiple Mountain West opponents, which I just did not see coming. They did fire their head coach mid-season, and they did go through a bit of a mid-season run with their interim staff. They beat Penn State, they beat Michigan State, they beat Maryland, all back-to-back before they eventually returned to their, sucking again, and they finished the season 3-9 with those only wins coming against the teams I just mentioned. So, yeah, not a great season for UCLA. Definitely not as exciting as I thought it would be. It is what it is. The Indiana Hoosiers. And oh, no.
Yikes. Okay, this prediction aged like spoiled milk. Did not expect to see Indiana this low. I really didn't think I had them this low in the preseason. So yeah, I can't wait to see what stupid things I'm about to say here. I ranked the national champion, undefeated national champion, at number 10 in their own conference.
I'm about to look like an idiot. I don't want to watch this. All right. Last year was not some Cinderella Mickey Mouse run. It was legit. And now the question is, can they do it again with a new quarterback? And the answer is yes. They can do it with a new quarterback. And I don't know why I cannot listen to my own logic. I have sat here for 2 years in a row now telling people, hey, don't sleep on Indiana. They're going to be a lot better than you think, for then me to proceed to put them way lower than they should be. So that's on me. I don't know why I can't just listen to what I say on my own videos, but yeah, it's pretty rough. Fernando Mendoza from Cal. He's not really a superstar, but he's steady. Not a superstar. Fernando Mendoza is not a superstar. Of course, I would say that about the Heisman winning, future number 1 overall draft pick, national championship winning quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, just the GOAT. But no, he's not a superstar. But, I mean, I guess in the preseason I had reason to think that. At Cal, he was really good. He had a lot of heart, but he didn't show what he showed at Indiana. Kurt Cinetti brought that out of him. It was just crazy. He's smart, and he already has some chemistry with the wide receiver they brought in Jonathan Brady, who followed him from Cal. And I think it's always a great sign when a receiver follows a quarterback through the transfer portal, because it kind of shows that he trusts that guy enough. I mean, as he should, but also I don't think Jonathan Brady was even in the top 5 receivers for Indiana this year. I don't think I heard his name very much at all. So I don't know what happened there, but yeah, I don't think he ended up even being that big of a deal there to literally pick up his stuff and move to wherever he's throwing the ball. And Mendoza's going to be throwing to some pretty solid wide receivers, including returners Elijah Surratt and Amar Cooper. Quietly one of the most underrated receiver groups in the conference, but finally some credibility, some ball knowledge from past me, dude. Surratt and Cooper were just absolute beasts this season, along with the GOAT Charlie Becker, who I didn't mention. But, dude, that guy was insane. Super clutch. So, I think the biggest upgrade to this Indiana offense was the trenches. The O-line was a question last year, to say the least, but now it's a strength. They have some returning starters, excellent portal pickups, and legitimate depth. Sure, the line of scrimmage was huge for Indiana. They massively improved along that offensive line. They might lose a little bit of that run game without Justice Ellison, but Kalen Black is a solid back, and the depth is better than it looks on paper. Let's look at... Yeah, so they were more than just fine in the run game with Hemby, and then also Kalen Black. They had a great run game. So, also, again, that was aided by their offensive line, but great run game, great offensive line, great everything, honestly. Everything was great. Defense now, though. Remember, all the guys that Kurt Cignetti brought in from James Madison, they balled out in the Big Ten last year, and they're back. I know we had some questions about that last year, how they performed. Well, they performed well, and they're back. The defensive line is ferocious. They have a great pass rush, the best part of the unit. The linebackers, they're athletic, experienced, they're physical. Secondary, it's full of playmakers, and they trust the scheme. The bottom line is that, that defense was straight up elite this year, just like the offense. Incredible pass rush, excellent at tackling, and locked down in the secondary. I mean, D'Angelo Pons was just on everybody. He kept everyone on alert. He was incredible, especially for being such a short guy. Like he was incredible. This defense is not quite elite like Michigan or Iowa, but listen. I wish I could go back in time and talk to former me and talk some sense into him and warn him about how good this Indiana team would be. The defense was elite. I do not know what I was talking about. They were elite. It's tough. No 5 stars. No 5 stars on the whole team, offense or defense, but both sides of the ball were elite. It's disruptive, and it keeps Indiana in games. As for the ceiling, I think if quarterback plays clean, defense keeps up the chaos, another surprise 9-10 season could be coming for Indiana.
maybe even New Year's Six talk.
Nope.
But the floor is
Higher.
probably a little bit of a stall on offense. The run game fades. Still scrappy and maybe like bowl eligible. Probably around 6 to 7 wins. And number.
Dang, man. I really should have just trusted Kurt Cignetti after what we saw last year. I put the ceiling at 9 to 10 wins, which honestly at the time I think felt super generous, but they decided to have a perfect, undefeated national championship run that is going to go in the history books as one of the best teams ever. And we don't even have to talk about what I said about their floor because that didn't happen. I don't want to talk about it. I was wrong. Yeah, man. Indiana was one of the most efficient teams I've ever seen in college football. They managed to dominate without any 5 stars on their roster. Kurt Cignetti has proven that he is the best coach in college football, and I am just bozo for doubting them. Bozo.
9 of the Iowa Hawkeyes, and Iowa has been a team that's played the exact same brand of football for as long as I can remember. Elite defense and pitiful offense. But
okay, so before I get into my stuff about Iowa, we do get back on track here, or we don't get to get back on track here. I meant to say, I was way too low on Iowa as well. Not quite as bad as with Indiana, but they ended up at number 5 in my final rankings, and they're number 9 here. So, yeah, not great here either.
Maybe not for long. This time, there's actual hope on offense, and you might not have to watch the game through your fingers anymore because quarterback transfer Mark Gronowski, who won 2 FCS national championships in South Dakota State, he should be actually solid. He's dual threat. He's athletic. He's decisive. He has way more upside than Cade McNamara ever had. And if the shoulder injury heals fully, he might be the best Iowa quarterback in, well, a long, long time. His floor alone feels higher than what Iowa has rolled out recently. But what about the weapons that he has to throw to?
Yeah, so Gronowski, I was right about him at least. He did pan out pretty well. He didn't have incredible numbers, but for Iowa standards, I think he did pretty dang good. Definitely better than McNamara was, which was not a very high bar.
Yes, losing Caleb Johnson, the Big Ten rushing champ, hurts. There's no way around that. But the new quarterback duo is smaller, shiftier, and behind an O-line that returns 3 starters.
So yeah, the run game definitely wasn't what it was with Caleb Johnson, but it wasn't bad by any means.
Including an all-conference center in Logan Jones. At wide receiver, someone has to step up. Keep an eye on Jacob Hill. He flashed last year, and now he gets a real quarterback throwing to him. So I could see him making a jump. On defense, they're still the gold standard.
So the offensive line that returned 3 starters, they actually ended up winning the Joe Moore Award, which is the award for the best offensive line in the country. So that's about as good as you can get for an O-line. So no complaints there. As for the receivers, it's Iowa. So, I mean, what do you really expect? They were what they were. Almost half the targets ended up going to non-receivers anyways.
D-line has 3 of the top 4 defensive ends back. Excellent depth, excellent talent. Linebackers reloading, but it's Iowa. They always figure it out. Secondary is locked down, physical, experienced, and don't forget the hidden weapon, Caden Wetchen, the first team.
Yeah, and I'll get to Caden Wetchen in just a minute. But, yeah, defensively, it's Iowa football. I mean, defense is great as always. But, we'll get to Wetchen right now. Definitely feel good about talking about this at least.
All-American return specialist, and they have an All-American punter. So don't normally talk about special teams, but for Iowa, I think it's a really big specialty that they have going for them. Their special teams plus their defense can win games alone, but adding a little sprinkle of offense can't hurt. And I think it can make...
Yeah. So I feel really good about calling out special teams. Special teams was, in fact, a major factor for the Hawkeyes this season. Caden Wetchen, which I mentioned a few times, he won the Jet Award, which is the nation's best returner with 3 punt return touchdowns and 1,047 return yards, which is just incredible. Their punter was also above average at least. So, yeah, special teams was pretty great for them.
Iowa really lethal, honestly. So this team actually has a pretty high ceiling. I could see them doing really, really well, probably around 9 to 10 wins. If their defense can, stay as good as they were, special teams can stay as good as they were, and the offense ends up jumping from awful to average. But the floor is same old on offense with a grinded out 7 to 8 wins, but still competitive as always. And number 8.
So Iowa did hit their ceiling, if you do consider that ninth win coming in the bowl game, and then they went 6-3 in their conference. They were actually super close to a monumental season, with all of their losses being one possession losses that could have, and in some cases should have been, wins. And I'm not talking about games against like mediocre opponents. I'm talking like Indiana, the national champions, Oregon, who was in the playoffs, and USC, which was pretty close to being in the playoffs. Not actually that close, but they were a really good team as well. So all of their losses were to really good teams, and they were one possession games. So they also dominated against all their rivals, and they also won every other Big Ten game they played other than those opponents. So really, really good season for Iowa. Could have been monumental. Could have been a playoff run, but still really, really good.
8, I have the
Actually, let me take it back. They did not dominate against their rival in Iowa State. They lost that game, I believe.
Washington Huskies, and they honestly feel like a quiet contender. It's year 2 under Jed Fish, and I think it could be special, but they're going to need some players to step up.
Yeah, so we're back on track at 8 here with Washington. I had them at number 7 in my final ranking, so let's keep going on this track where I'm just close to being right or right about these teams, because I whiffed pretty heavily on the last 2 teams.
Desmond Williams Jr., he's taking over at quarterback. We saw him play in that bowl game against Louisville, and he showed some serious flashes there. He's a dual threat guy.
Put some respect on his name.
But he is still young, and he's raw. Running back Jonah Coleman could be one of the best running backs in the entire country. He's got power. He's got vision. He's got some big playability. The wide receiver room has talent, but they still need some people to step up, some consistent production.
Someone stepped up
to
for
be
sure.
Successful. But the big question mark here is the offensive line. They gave up the most sacks in the Big Ten last year, and that's a kind of stat that's going to define whether you can take that next big step.
They were better.
Fish attacked the portal, though. To maybe fix that, they added Carver Williams from Kansas State. He definitely helps, but it's a unit that needs chemistry, not just talent. And with a mobile quarterback like Williams Jr., protection doesn't necessarily always have to be perfect, but it cannot be the turnstile it was again. On defense,
yeah, so Damon Williams at quarterback, Jonah Coleman at running back, and Denzel Boston at wide receiver. They were a 3-headed monster for that offense, and we did get some of those receivers. They ended up stepping up. And offensive line, they definitely exceeded my expectations. Those transfers panned out, so they were pretty good there.
There's some big steps coming. They brought in a new defensive coordinator in Ryan Walters, who knows how to build an aggressive and opportunistic unit. I think that they have some huge gets from the portal. They have Takario Davis, who's an elite cornerback. He immediately raises the ceiling of this secondary. The front 7 has more depth. Proven production coming in, should be tougher against the run, and bring on a better pass rush. So for Washington, the ceiling here really...
Yeah, a lot of people doubted Washington's defense coming into the season, but I did not. As you can see, I believed in Washington's defense. They had a lot more depth than I think a lot of people expected. I believed that they would be good, and they were. So, yeah.
It really is a playoff spot, about 9 to 10 wins in a playoff spot.
Yeah,
I think that happens if the defense takes a big jump.
But they did get 9 wins.
If the O-line gels and if the offense balances run and pass, yeah, I think they have a really good shot at making the playoffs. The floor is about 7 to 8 wins, I think, if the offensive line is still leaky and the young quarterback is constantly under siege and the defense can't save them. That's when I think it's about 7 to 8 wins, but still not a bad season.
Yeah, so Washington, they did not get a playoff. They did not get a playoff spot. However, they did get 9 wins after their bowl win. 5 of their wins came in conference. So most of their losses end up coming to the big boys in the conference, outside of that one kind of weird loss to Wisconsin.
Number 7, I have the USC Trojans, and we all know the story here. Points
I was
are
a bit
not
off
the problem
on
but
USC here.
What about finally stopping somebody? USC is like the inverse of Iowa. They have an incredible offense every year and a pitiful defense. So let's talk about the specialty of their team. As usual, the offense. They are loaded once again. They have a quarterback in Jaden Mayava who is stepping in with a big arm. He's mobile, and in Lincoln Riley's systems, that usually means big numbers. He's the quarterback whisperer, so I expect great quarterback play. I have no concerns about that for this team. Wide receiver Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane, they should be stars. Tight end Lake McCree is back, and he's a steady target. And at running back, Brian Jackson has showed flashes in the bowl game over Texas A&M. If he carries that over, the run game could be better than people expect. But again, let's talk about the defense. That's what people really want.
Okay, so I was a bit off here. I had USC at number 4 in my final rankings. And yeah, as usual, Lincoln Riley has his offense humming. The guys I had mentioned, they pretty much all popped off. Jade Mayava had a great season at quarterback. Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane were just impossible to guard through the air. Lake McCree, he did his thing as well. Brian Jackson wasn't really a huge factor, honestly, but they did have some other running backs that did the job, like King Miller. Most impressive offensively to me was how improved their O-line was. They were much more physical this season than last year's unit, and the pass protection and run blocking were also a lot better, too.
I don't know. They do have some bigger bodies, but can they really deliver? They really hit the portal to get bigger and more physical, especially on the defensive line. They needed that. Depth is better, experience is improved, but the question is, will it matter when they face elite offenses? Secondary is the biggest concern here. There are some new transfers, but it still looks like a pretty big weak spot, and I think Lincoln Riley really needs this defense to step up to honestly secure his job, because even though he's had successful seasons, I still think he's a little bit on the hot seat. As for the ceiling of this team, I think it is 10-plus wins.
I don't think he's on the hot seat anymore. Defensively, they were just okay, but honestly, being just okay is kind of a blessing for USC since they have been just terrible the last few years. So okay is a major step in the right direction. I don't think that it would have been realistic for me to expect USC's defense to be like good. But they are progressing every year, and I like that with their O-line, similar to their O-line, they were much more physical on the defensive side of the ball this year. So I can give them credit there.
I think that they could be a playoff team if that defense isn't awful.
Not quite a playoff team.
The offense does what it does. I think they're legit if that happens. But the floor is the same as it has been the past few years. Defense hemorrhaging points with shootouts every week and 7 to 8 wins, but outside of a real title contention. So it's a mixed bag. We'll see if that defense can be better. It was better last year. Hopefully it takes another step this year for USC to get back on track for where they want to be.
Yeah, and a few years ago, Lincoln Riley had talked about, hey, I'm going to change the philosophy here. I'm going to start building towards a different type of more physical team, and I do think that year after year it's shown slowly, and I think that will be better for USC long term. They did finish the season with 9 wins and 3 losses in the regular season. They picked up their 4th loss in the bowl game against TCU. It felt like a pretty good season for USC. They beat Iowa and beat Michigan, which were 2 pretty massive wins, not because of those teams rankings, but because those were very physical teams, and that kind of proved that they can beat those teams for the first time since Lincoln Riley got there. But they also did get upset by Illinois and also picked up losses in Notre Dame and Oregon. So still, though, a step in the right direction.
All right, well, the next 6 teams I like a lot. We're getting to a point in the list where it's really hard to decide where teams should rank. I like all these teams, so a lot of these could be interchangeable, but let's go ahead and get it started with number 6, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And this is the moment history says you circle if you're a Cornhuskers fan. Matt Rule's 3rd year has been the breakout year everywhere else he's coached, and this roster is locked and ready to do the
history did not repeat itself. Year 3 under Matt Rule did not pan out, but nothing. I was too high on Nebraska. 6 spots too high, actually. I had them at number 12 in my final ranking, so not a good look.
Exact same thing. At quarterback, we already know they have Dylan Raiola, the 5-star, number 1 overall recruit.
He got injured.
With a full season under his belt. He showed slashes last year. Now reports say he's slimmed down.
We'll never know.
He can add mobility, and he should be really, really solid this upcoming season. The offensive line, quietly one of the deepest units in the Big Ten, built through the portal and returning experience. They have running back Emmett Johnson, who should be able to thrive behind that offensive line, both as a runner and as a receiver.
Yeah.
Speaking of receivers, the wide receiver room got some new faces from the portal.
Okay, so Dylan Raiola, like I said, he got hurt and he got injured during the season, so that played a major factor in why Nebraska ended up falling off. And the offensive line was just not as good as I expected. But Emmett Johnson, he did explode, and he kind of carried the team on his back for most of the season.
To give Raiola more options at tight end, that is a bit of a question mark, but offensive weapons overall look so much better. The defense has some new faces, but I expect the same toughness. They did lose their defensive coordinator, Tony White, and anchor Ty Robinson, but they added Marquez Watson-Trent from the Sun Belt. He was a defensive player of the year there at linebacker. They also added Dason McCullough from Oklahoma. He is a freak athlete at linebacker and edge. Front seven should stay physical and disciplined. Rules teams never get pushed around, so red zone and third down defense, that's what needs some work.
Yikes.
And we're going to have to wait and see if that new defensive coordinator can fix those issues. As for the ceiling for this team, like I said,
So much for not getting pushed around, because Nebraska could not stop the run all season. They got bullied. They didn't get pressure. And surprisingly, their secondary was actually their biggest strength, which honestly just genuinely shocked me. I definitely wouldn't say they breached that top 20 status that I mentioned. I think Nebraska fans are pretty unhappy with how the DC hire ended up panning out after this season. He was not good. He was not very good. And again, some players that were good last year just weren't good this year. So it feels more of like a coaching schematic thing, which really sucks.
The floor for this team, I would say, is probably still bowl eligible, but just outside the playoff talk. I think that would happen if the offense is only slightly better and the new defensive coordinator can't keep this defense elite. But I really lean more towards the ceiling than the floor, probably somewhere in the middle of those two.
They ended up going 7-5 in the regular season before picking up their sixth loss in the bowl game. 4 of their wins came in conference, so they were right around where I set the floor for them. Even though they had a winning season, they lost all their major games. They did beat Maryland, Michigan State, UCLA, and Northwestern, which honestly none of those wins are very impressive to me. Maybe Northwestern, but yeah. Nothing great on their schedule, so I would call it not a good season for Nebraska. Not what fans expected.
Number 5, I have Illinois, and if you are looking for a Big Ten dark horse, they are.
Here we go.
Last year, it was Indiana that shocked the world by playing physical, tough football and pushing their way into a.
I knew I was high on Illinois coming into this video. I forgot how high. I had them at number 9 in my final rankings, so quite a bit off here. I really thought that they were going to be like the next Indiana, which made me look very silly after they played Indiana. I placed a lot of stock into their returning production, and it just kind of burned me.
Playoff spot, and this year I think Illinois is built to do that exact same thing. They have an offense that's full of grown men up front and a quarterback in Luke Altmaier that is back and battle-tested. He's
solid.
Steady, he's mobile enough, and he knows the system. But their biggest advantage is that offensive line. They have a full set of starting guys returning, maybe the most underrated unit in the conference.
No, dude. Luke Altmaier, like I said, Luke Altmaier is good, very solid, but that offensive line was just not as elite as I expected. They allowed way too much pressure, and they just did not open up running lanes.
That line plus multiple capable backs means Illinois will be able to pound the rock and control tempo in so many games. The one question mark here is the wide receiver room. They did lose some talent there, and their replacements are solid, but not quite stars. But don't sleep on the tight ends to fill in those gaps as well. On defense,
I was kind of backwards here. The running backs, they were underwhelming. Like I said, the O-line was underwhelming. But the one area that I said was that we didn't know much about the wide receiver room. There actually was an unexpected star that emerged there in Hank Beatty, or Hank Betty. I don't remember how to say his name. But he actually was pretty good for Illinois.
They are nasty and experienced. Xavier Scott is one of the best linebackers in the Big Ten. He's an excellent blitzer. Dylan Rosek, he is a tackling machine. He's back and better after injury, hopefully. The defensive line lost guys to the draft, but Wisconsin transfers are going to slide in there and keep that front stout. And in the secondary, they're deep, they're experienced, there's playmakers all over. The bottom line is the defense will push people around. They may not be the number one in the conference at that, but number 3 is top realistic. I think they are a top 3 defense in the Big Ten. So here's why I think they're going to shock everybody.
Okay. On defense, Illinois was not the mean machine that I thought that they would be. Instead, they ended up ranking 93rd in the country in yards allowed per game, which is not third best, but third worst in the conference. And they consistently struggled against good offenses.
Physical teams like this don't disappear late in the season. They wear you down. And they match up really well with finesse offenses like USC. They can slow you down. They can force mistakes.
That's funny.
And if the wide receivers step up and keep defenses honest, they are a nightmare matchup. My biggest worry, though, is that
it's kind of funny that I ended up mentioning that their defense would be able to beat finesse offenses like USC's, because Illinois actually did end up beating USC. So I guess I was right about that. But I didn't feel like USC was as much finesse this year. But still, they ended up beating them.
there are not going to be enough plays through the air. If teams load the box and Altmaier and the receivers can't punish them, that's a real problem. My ceiling for this team, like I said, it's what Indiana was last year. They can make the playoffs. They can make it to the Big Ten championship game. They can win the Big Ten championship game.
They
can bully their way into that conversation. However, if that wide receiver room can't produce and the offense becomes one-dimensional, I think they would still finish in the top half of the Big Ten, but they would be short of contending. At number 4,
So Illinois, they ended the regular season with 8 wins before picking up their 9th win against Tennessee in the bowl game. So again, it's not a terrible season. They still won a bowl game. It's great for Illinois to be at the level that they're at right now under Brett Bielema. He's doing a great job there. But they definitely did not live up to my expectations for them, and I think a lot of fans' expectations for them with the schedule that they had being what everyone thought was a pretty easy schedule. So, yeah.
Have the Michigan Wolverines. Last year, it was defense. I
don't feel bad about
an offense that
pretty good.
was stuck in second gear. But this year, the quarterback room alone could change everything. The true freshman, Bryce Underwood, is the crown jewel recruit. He's got a huge arm. He's athletic. He's a leader type. He's young and he's raw, but Michigan has not had a quarterback this naturally talented and athletic in a long time. And it was a smart move bringing in Chip Lindsey at OC to modernize this attack. And even if Underwood is not ready, they also added a transfer quarterback in Mikey Keene from Fresno State, who is rock solid, proven, and he should basically make it to where the floor for quarterback is higher no matter who they go with. As for the weapons, they did lose their tight end, Colston Loveland, and a dynamic running back in Donovan Edwards, but they added guys like Donovan McCulley from Indiana. He's an all Big Ten wide receiver, and Justice Haynes from Alabama, who's a great running back. So offensively, even though they lost some pieces, I think they're going to be better, which is not super hard because they weren't great last year. The offensive line did lose some pieces, but they recruited well, so they're not going to fall off a cliff or anything. So the bottom line is, even with turnover, like I said, this group has more explosive potential and more big play potential and a higher ceiling than they did last year. On defense,
I had Michigan at number 6, I believe, in my final rankings, so only 2 spots off. Bryce Underwood, obviously very talented. He showed plenty of flashes, but he was also very inconsistent, as you can expect with most freshmen or young players playing. As usual, the running backs were their workhorses on the offense. You had Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes, who proved to be very efficient and effective. Obviously, they did miss those guys, like I mentioned, like Colston Loveland and Donovan Edwards, and some of their offensive line guys as well, but they were much better offensively as a whole than last year. So even though they missed those pieces, I think overall they were net better. They're still elite up front. They did lose some NFL stars in Mason Graham and Will Johnson, but the front seven are still going to be stacked. Both starting linebackers return, and there's proven depth behind them. The defensive line edge rush, still top tier. Secondary is a question, though, especially if Rod Moore can't return healthy from that ACL injury. But if he does come back strong, the secondary should be fine. I think even a decent step forward in offense turns this into a much more balanced Michigan team. Defense should still be top 5 nationally, especially if the run defense and pass rush are there. And Bryce Underwood's ceiling is truly special. So I don't think they were top 5 nationally. I can't remember.
The one downside here, though, is obviously you're relying on a freshman quarterback. That's risky, even if he does have elite tools.
So Defensively, Michigan continues to be great. They were physical. They were hard to beat. I don't know if they were top 5 like I predicted. I have to go back and check on that. But their defense does continue to keep them in games, and it did once again this season. And if the secondary doesn't hold up, elite passing teams could find some cracks. So the ceiling is undefeated. I think this team has what it takes to be undefeated.
Yeah,
if Bryce Underwood
not quite there.
is as good as we expect him to be, and like the rest of the offense is able to match that defense. If not, if there's too many mistakes from the freshmen, it could be like a 9 or 10 win season. But either way, I think this is a better Michigan team. We saw a lot of the players that are new play in that bowl game against Alabama and beat them. Same with Ohio State. So I think this team will be just fine. At number 3, so Michigan finished the regular season with 9 wins and 3 losses before picking up their 4th loss in the bowl game against Texas. That's right about where I had their season listed. So they gave me about what I expected. They did unfortunately lose the game to Ohio State for the first time in years, which is a huge bummer, along with losses to USC and Oklahoma. But they did have a pretty dominant win over Washington, which was pretty good. Unfortunately, Michigan capped off the season with another scandal, this time with their head coach, Sharon Moore, who is no longer the head coach at Michigan. And if you don't know what happened, just look it up. So it was kind of crazy, but they ended up getting out of him as a head coach. I don't think they really wanted to keep him around much longer. He always kind of felt like a stopgap, and I think they have a much better guy there now, all things considered. So here I have the Oregon Ducks.
Okay.
There's a new quarterback. There are new pieces,
back on track.
but the same explosive DNA that kept Oregon near the top. Dan Lanning is building a mean, green, fighting machine in Autzen, and 2025 could prove to be the year they show how quickly they can reload rather than rebuild. Gone is Dylan Gabriel, but in comes Dante Moore. He's got a big arm, he's mobile, and he had the maturity to stick around and learn rather than transferring out of the program. Expect some growing pains for that early,
massive respect.
But Moore's upside is sky high, and landing in that fan base, trust him. Now, they did lose.
Dante Moore was pretty awesome for the Ducks. He had some bad moments in there with his inexperience that showed a few times, but especially in his losses to Indiana. But on the whole, he was just really, really good. And I will say, going back a little bit, I did have Oregon as my number 3 in the postseason rankings, so we're right back on track here. And my preseason and postseason rankings were completely aligned on that. Back to Dante Moore. I have a lot of respect for him waiting behind Dylan Gabriel last year, knowing he wouldn't be the starter. He could have been the starter where he was at before that. And then coming back again this year when he could have gone to the NFL draft and probably been the second overall quarterback. He decided he wanted more time to learn, and I have massive respect for him to doing that. Love Dante Moore. Their best wide receiver and probably their best weapon in Evan Stewart to injury. Yeah, that sucks.
That
really
stings.
Sucks.
He was a huge piece to that vertical game, so losing him is really, really rough. But transfers like wide receiver Mekhi Hughes and Kenyon Madique at tight end can fill that gap. Hopefully, they're both explosive athletes, and there's just still plenty of... I think I meant to say Kenyon Sadiq and Malik Benson. So I don't know what I was on there, but they both really popped off. They were great additions to Oregon. Of speed at the skill positions, and they're just younger and less proven, but they're still really, really good. The offensive line is new but not green. They're replacing multiple starters, yes, but all those new faces are seniors, so the experience could keep more protected early. The real question is just going to be whether they can gel quickly enough to avoid those early slip-ups. On defense, so they also had one of the best running back rooms in the country, if not the best. O-line were Joe Moore Award finalists, so obviously they were super good. There was a lot to like about this Oregon offense, but they also showed some inexperience at times, especially in their 2 games against Indiana. Like I said, injuries obviously hurt as well, so didn't reach their full potential, but we'll see. I think them get even better next year. That pass rush is a nightmare. They might quietly be the best pass rush in the entire country.
No,
the edge defenders are fast, they're nasty,
that.
They're deep, and opposing quarterbacks are not going to be able to sleep well when they're going up against this Oregon defensive line. The secondary,
There are new faces there, but Lanning's track record on defense is elite. Even with question marks,
they were
the
pretty
back
elite.
end should be solid. Elite recruiting plus those portal additions means Oregon is not going anywhere. Even with the youth, this is still one of the most talented rosters in the Big Ten, and they're one of the fastest as well.
I stand by that.
So the
I think
ceiling
they're
for
really
this
great.
team is an undefeated season. I think if
So they didn't go undefeated. Their 2 losses on the whole season came to Indiana, which I'll talk about in a second. But defensively, that pass rush just did not really show up like I thought it was going to. They finished in the bottom half of the Big Ten in sacks and tackles for loss. But their secondary is where they were elite. They finished the season at number 5 pass defense and number 7 in overall defense. So definitely not too shabby.
more clicks quickly and that defense finds a way to terrorize everybody, Oregon could go undefeated and win a national championship. The floor is going to rest in the hands of that young quarterback, the offensive line, them not gelling. That's going to be how you get that floor, which is about 9 to 10 wins. But I think they're going to be better than 9 wins.
So at the end of the day, Oregon finished the regular season 11-1, with their only loss being to the eventual national champs. And then they made their way to the playoffs and blew out the teams they played in their first 2 rounds before getting handled by Indiana again, leaving them with a final record of 13-2. So still a really good season. Both of their losses were to the eventual national champion, one of the best teams we've seen in a while, most efficient college football teams ever. So they had some really impressive wins, including USC, Washington, Texas Tech, and of course they were the ones that broke Penn State. They also beat Iowa. So some great wins there, and the highest quality losses you can have. So, very good season for the Ducks, but they still can't seem to make it all the way, and they just came 1 game short this season.
Here's where my list may shock a few people, because at number 2 I have the defending national champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes. And the drill. They're top 5 in recruiting. They have crazy
a lot of people called me out for having Ohio State at number 2. They did end up number 2 in my preseason and postseason rankings. They end up number 2 in the standings as well. However, the team I put above them, which I remember and I will get to, it was crazy to put them above them after all. But yeah, Ohio State 2 actually did pan out in the long run.
Talent, but 2025 brings some real unknowns. They have a new quarterback, they have new coordinators, and holes in surprising spots. So let's break it down. Julian Sayin, the former 5-star recruit, originally played for Nick Saban, or was recruited by Nick Saban at Alabama, but he might be more talented than recent Ohio State quarterbacks, but he's brand new and unproven at this level.
He's really good.
The good news is he'll be standing behind what could be one of the best offensive lines in the country. But the bad news is the running back room is shockingly thin after losing Henderson and Judkins. So right now it's unclear who running back 1 even is going to be. The weapons are still elite, but they're a bit thinner. Jeremiah Smith obviously is a legit superstar, maybe the best wide receiver in the nation. After him, Carnell Tate is talented, but there's no Emeka Egbuka that's a proven number 2 guy. Max Clary, he transfers in at tight end, and he's a huge addition. He could be a safety blanket really for Sayin. As for the defense, they have a strong secondary, but they're a little...
Julian Sayin, he was really, really good in his first year with the Buckeyes, and I think that he will get even better as the years go on. Super, super talented. Obviously, Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, they're just monster wide receivers, some of the best in the country. Max Clare proved to be a really, really good tight end as well. Offensive line did not quite pan out as well as I thought that they would. They really got exposed in those 2 games against those 2 games at the end of the season against Indiana and Miami. But again, those are 2 of the most elite defensive pass rushes, so they were still pretty good. Running back was solid, but it wasn't incredible. But overall, this was a really solid offense. But again, which I'll talk about this later too, but they didn't play a lot of opponents, so we could really see how good their offense really was. So it's kind of hard to judge. A bit shakier up front this year. They have a new defensive coordinator, and they're replacing all 4 starters on the defensive line. The new guys are highly recruited, and they look like they could be really great, but they're still inexperienced, so there's just not much proven depth there.
The back end is rock solid with Caleb Downs, maybe the best DB in the country, maybe even the best player in the country. Then you got Igbenusson and Jermaine Matthews Jr. They will make passing on this team an absolute nightmare. Both coordinators are gone, though, so new schemes on both sides of the ball. So the question is, how quickly can they adapt to everything? Here's where they're still elite, though. They have some insane talent in that pipeline. No team in the Big Ten reloads quite like Ohio State does. Even with the new faces, the baseline is still really, really good. Biggest concerns is, again, their brand new quarterback, the brand new D-line, the new coordinators. It's a lot to fix fast.
Yeah, so defensively, they just balled out. Despite all the turnover that they had, they were the number 1 total defense, the number 1 passing defense, the number 1 scoring defense, and the number 7 rushing defense. So defense was definitely not an issue for the Buckeyes.
Running game might be the weakest it's been in years. So the ceiling for this team is still back-to-back. National champions, undefeated, with a win over the rival finally at Michigan. They win it all. That's the ceiling. They could definitely get there. It's pretty easy to see. They're one of the odds favorites to do it. The floor, though, I think is 9-10 or not.
They were the odds favorites going into the playoffs. So they were odds to win it all really, really late until they end up losing it.
9 to 10 wins. And that's going to basically happen if the run game sputters, the D-line cracks, and then they end up being, like I said, 9 to 10 wins. But not that top tier. So that's why I have this team at number 2 and not number 1.
So they did not get their back-to-back national titles, as you all know, and they lost back-to-back games, one in the Big Ten championship game, and then in the semifinal game against Miami, who played for the national championship game. So basically they lost to the number 1 and the number 2 team in the country, both teams that played in the national title game. Those were their only losses on the entire season. They finished the regular season undefeated. They did beat Michigan, though, which was a huge jump for them, something they haven't done in years. So for some Ohio State fans, that is actually more important than winning another title. So at least you have that. And I'm going to tell you guys ahead of time, I already know who's at number 1. And if you have kind of been doing the math in your head, you probably know as well. And I'm going to look really bad here. So let's just get it over with.
Number 1, the best team in the Big Ten, I have the Penn State Nittany Lions. Because if not now,
I had Penn State at number 1.
That's the question Penn State fans all around the country are asking. And it's not an issue of talent. It's, can they finally win the games they usually lose?
No. And they also can't win the games they're supposed to win, apparently, this year. I don't know what was worse, having Indiana at number 10 or Penn State at number 1. But Penn State, if you must know, they ended at number 8 in my final rankings, which is honestly kind of generous even, based on what their season ended up looking like.
So let me tell you why I think that this year is Penn State's best chance in years, best window to do this in years. For one, they have a returning quarterback in Drew Aller who is got a huge upside. He's a huge plus, one of the few big teams in the league with a veteran starter. In the backfield, they have Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. Maybe the best running back duo in college football. In fact, I'm not going to say maybe, they are the best running back duo in college football. O-line, mostly intact, bringing continuity to that run game and pass protection. And they made some major upgrades at receiver, a position group that desperately needed it after they were handicapped last year because of it. They brought in Pena from Syracuse, who is a reliable number 1 guy. I saw him play at Syracuse. He was a beast.
I mean, can you really blame me for putting him so high? I mean, they literally patched the one area that had been holding them back the whole time, which is wide receiver. And then they also had a ton of returning production, which is like the formula for winning the past 2 national titles. So, like, I mean, how could I have seen this coming? How could anybody have seen the downfall they had coming?
Losing Tyler Warren at tight end obviously hurts a lot, but Luke Reynolds is ready to step up. I expect solid tight end production to continue. The wide receiver room overall looks a lot deeper and more versatile than they were last year. As for defense, they brought in Jim Knoll.
And look, I know they had a bad season, but let's be real. If they had just won that Oregon game, which I know is a tall task. I mean, whatever. If shoulda, coulda, woulda, everything. But if they would not have lost to Oregon, they would not have spiraled like they did. You can't convince me that if they beat Oregon, they were going to lose to Northwestern and UCLA and all those other teams. They went from a one-score game with a playoff semifinal team in Oregon to 5 more back-to-back losses against teams, like I said, like UCLA and Northwestern. I mean, sure, Drew Aller once again didn't really impress before getting injured and being out for the season, but Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are far more talented than they displayed. And I did expect more from Pena as well. They just continue to have receiving woes. And honestly, I think they just gave up. I think that's what happened. I think they just gave up after that Oregon game, but whatever. It's just really hard to talk about the position groups on this team because they just gave up, dude, in the middle of the season, and they also fired their head coach early. So, yeah, this was supposed to be the best year they've had, and it ended up being their worst in a long, long time. Super disappointing. I don't know if Penn State will be in a position to make a run for many years to come now. They had a terrible recruiting class because they didn't have a head coach in time. They did transfer in a lot of guys. Matt Campbell's in. He transferred in a bunch of guys from Iowa State, so they're going to look like Iowa State and Penn State uniforms, I guess. But it really feels like their window may have closed. I don't know. From Ohio State, he was the DC there, and he's a guy who helped transform that defense into an elite unit as well.
So I think he can do the same thing with a Penn State defense that's already really, really good. Even though they lost Abdul Carter, the best defensive player and the emotional leader of that team, the rest of the defense is still stacked with experience, talented guys. They should still be one of the best units in the Big Ten. And now they have a great defensive coordinator coming in as well. So why do I think this year's different? I think the roster looks like the blueprint that has worked for the last 2 national champions, and that's heavy returning production, continuity at quarterback, and a veteran defense. The difference maker here is Aller's experience. There's no first-year jitters or anything. He knows the system. He knows the league, and he's surrounded by weapons. But they still have to actually do it and beat the big dogs. I mean, that's Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan. They have to beat those teams.
They didn't even play Michigan.
The ceiling here, I think, again,
lost.
Since they're number 1, obviously, I believe that they can go undefeated. I think that they can win the Big Ten.
Nope.
I think they can finally beat those big dogs. They are that good.
No, they're not.
The floor, I think, is them doing the same thing they always do and dropping those frustrating games, finishing as, again, very good, but not great, 10-2 type team. So, final word is that Penn State has been good, not great for years, but this is their most complete, experienced, and playoff-ready roster they've ever had since I've been watching. And if they're ever going to do it, it feels like it has to be this year.
Well, then I guess they're not doing it because they did not do it this past year. They fell well below my floor for them even. They went 6-6 in the regular season and then beat another disappointing preseason team in Clemson in the bowl game, which funnily enough, I think Penn State and Clemson might have been my national title game in the preseason, which aged terribly if that's the case. It was either Penn State and it was some combination of Penn State, LSU, or Clemson. All 3 of those teams woefully underperformed. So, yeah, that did not pan out in the slightest. So that was a look at my preseason predictions. I honestly feel like I was pretty on the money on most teams outside of a few big blunders, primarily that Penn State and Indiana blunder. But please stay tuned to the channel and let me know if you like this video and want me to do the same thing with the other conferences. See you guys next time. Peace.